I'm Jay Elias, General Legal Counsel at Dyer Lake Funeral Home in North Attleboro. Welcome to this episode of Live and Learn, a series of programs designed to be informative, educational, and upbeat, and always intended to enhance and encourage our personal wellness and awareness. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. You're looking up at the sky at the end of the day as the sun is just beginning to set. There's a beautiful red glow. Does it really mean that tomorrow's weather will be nice? Or when you wake up early in the morning and there's a reddish glow to the sky, does that portend a stormy day? By the way, in the United Kingdom, the saying is slightly different. Red sky at night, shepherd's delight. Red sky in morning, shepherd's warning. In 1593, in fact, William Shakespeare referenced the red skies of evening and morning in his play Venus and Adonis, and the same can be found in the Bible in the book of Matthew. Weather predictions and weather lore have been around for centuries. Sailors and farmers alike relied on their ability to predict the weather to navigate their ships or plant and harvest crops. But how accurate is weather lore? Can a red sky at night foretell a delightful next day? It seems the truth is that yes, weather lore can be a relatively reliable predictor. And the red sky adage? Well, that's one that's particularly reliable. The colors we see in the sky are due to rays of sunlight being scattered and split into the colors of the spectrum as they pass through the atmosphere and reflect off water vapor and particles there. Not only do the amount of water, vapor, and dust particles in the atmosphere serve as reliable indicators of weather conditions, they also determine the colors we see in the sky. So why is it that a red sky at night foretells a sailor's delight? It's likely because a red sky means that the setting sun is sending its light through a high concentration of dust particles, and that usually indicates high pressure and stable air coming in from the west. Nice weather to follow. Then again, a red sunrise can mean that a high pressure system with its pleasant weather has already passed, indicating that a low pressure or storm system may be moving to the east. A morning sky that's a deep, fiery red can mean there's water vapor content in the atmosphere, and precipitation, it's on the way. One more weather lore, true or false? Is it true that a halo around the sun or moon predicts wet or stormy weather? The short answer, once again, it's true. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration defines that halo as a variety of bright circles or arcs centered on the sun or moon, and it's caused by the refraction of light by ice crystals suspended in the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, but does seeing a halo really foretell that a wet storm is nearby? It seems this one is true. Halos are caused by high cirrus clouds refracting light, and they're made up of a million of those tiny crystals. They reflect the light, and they're a sign of wet weather. In fact, these clouds are typically the first to arrive before a storm, streaming out ahead in front of a storm. The fact is this: when it comes to weather lore and its reliability, we should think in the short term rather than the long term, like the red sky at night or the halo around the sun. Those long-term weather lores, like Punxsutawney Phil and his famous 6 weeks of winter weather predictions on Groundhog Day, well, there's really no scientific or meteorological basis to be had. Truth or false? Truth or lies? Here's a question. Are humans the only creatures that lie or deceive? It's been said that a dog is man or a woman's best friend, and that probably also quite true. A cat is their master. But have you ever wondered whether your pet is actually being honest with you? Can animals even lie or be deceitful? We'd like to believe that our sweet and loving pets, our true friends, couldn't possibly intentionally lie or deceive us. After all, one of the things people often love most about their pets is that, unlike some people, pets are non-judgmental. They love you for who you are. Or do they? According to quite a few different research studies, pets, at least dogs in particular, know very well how to deceive us. As in, they will not tell the truth if it benefits them. Yikes. In one interesting research study from the University of Zurich, dogs were presented with a cooperative human research companion and a competitive human research companion. The individual labeled as cooperative shared any treats they were given with their canine companion, their dog. The person labeled as a competitive companion, when presented with treats, would show the treats to the dog, keeping them for themselves though. They wouldn't share them. As the study unfolded, the dogs were then asked to lead their human research companions to one of three boxes. One box was empty, a second one contained a rather plain biscuit, and the third box contained sausages, considered to be the dog's favorite treat. The results of the study revealed that when asked, the dogs were most likely to lead their cooperative human companion to the box with the sausage, the good stuff. And for the competitive research companions who wouldn't share their treats, well, their dogs led them away from the box that contained those tasty sausages and steered them directly to one of the other two less than appealing boxes. It seems that the dogs simply didn't want to share their sausages with the companions who wouldn't share their treats, so the dogs knowingly led their competitive human companions away from the good stuff. They knew that if they took their competitive human companions to the tasty sausage box, the companions probably weren't going to share the sausages with them, clearly suggesting that the dogs had no problem with deceit if it benefited them. And then there are those smart but sneaky squirrels. Can they lie or be deceitful? Undoubtedly, a top priority for many tree squirrels is to store thousands of acorns and nuts during the warmer months to be able to survive the cold and barren winter. Squirrels have long been known to have amazing long-term memories, collecting and storing thousands of nuts every autumn. They use this excellent memory to relocate their stored food when they need it. Coupled with their sense of smell, they can accurately target their digging to ensure that they have enough food to survive the winter. Most squirrels are what's known as scatter hoarders. That means they hide each individual nut they find in a different place, rather than stockpiling them in one central location. And therein lies a problem. In most cases, the food the squirrels dig up in the winter months will be the supplies they themselves buried during autumn, although it may include the nuts stored by other squirrels. In fact, it's been estimated that a squirrel will lose as much as 25% of their buried food to such robberies. So to reduce the risk of losing their buried treasure, if a squirrel knows that another squirrel is watching it, they've been known to engage in something called false or deceptive caching. That's when a squirrel digs a hole, vigorously covers it up, but without depositing a nut or acorn or any other food. It's part of an elaborate game to throw off potential food thieves. You see, when a squirrel notices other squirrels or birds or even humans watching them bury their food, they'll pretend to bury the item, but then secretly carry it to a different storage location. They'll even go through an entire nut-bearing exercise, taking time to camouflage the fake cache with leaves or sticks, as if they were really storing an item of food. So it seems deceit is not just for humans or dogs, squirrels. Enough about those sneaky animals. What about people? And how good are you at spotting a liar? Some people, and experts in the field, say that there are ways to spot signs of untruthfulness, whether it's a change in body movements, facial expressions, the tone of voice, or the content of someone's speech. They are sometimes referred to as the codes of communication. For example, a lot of people associate eye contact with lying and avoiding it with lying, But for any number of reasons, whether it's feeling socially anxious or from boredom, it seems that doesn't necessarily mean someone is lying to you just because they don't look you straight in the eye when they're speaking. At the very least, it can be unsettling, though. Others say that liars will use gestures or tells, for example, with their hands after they speak, as opposed to during or before a conversation. It's been said that a liar's mind may be preoccupied with making up a story or figuring out if they're being believed, so they try to embellish their stories even after they've spoken the words. See, we normally gesture when talking just before or at the time we're making a statement, as I'm doing, rather than afterwards. It's also said that someone who's lying to us is more likely to gesture with both of their hands because it adds a little bit more flourish. Then there are those studies that suggest a liar's intentions can be apparent by reading their face. Signs like blushing cheeks or darting eyes. Some say the very act of lying provokes strong emotions that are difficult to contain for the liar. For example, nerves, guilt, and maybe even a bit of exhilaration at the challenge of lying. So that even if a liar thinks they're being expressionless, there may be some tiny micro-expressions that give them up as lying. With familiarity, of course, we may better be able to tell and spot someone's tics or tells when they're telling us a lie. The fact is, there seems to be no universal dictionary of body language to refer to. Some people may giggle nervously, while others will stare intensely. Some will go to great lengths to avoid eye contact, while others will stare you directly in your eyes without so much as a blink. According to one interesting study of airport security personnel trained to look for people who were lying to them, just 50 out of 20,000 of those contacts, those being trained, managed to make a correct judgment with any degree of accuracy about whether someone was lying to them. Fingers crossed. We've all felt the need for some good luck or seeking a bit of a boost in our good fortune or even our courage. Fingers crossed. We may hope or wish or even pray. We may also cross our fingers as a silent request for help or protection, or we might just ask others to keep their fingers crossed on our behalf. Some of us, mostly children, may cross our fingers to excuse telling a white lie or to invalidate a promise made. Fingers crossed behind your back. There are countless versions about the origins of crossing our fingers. It's been said that crossing the fingers dates back to pre-Christian times, when the cross was a sign of unity, and it was thought that some kind of benign spirits resided at the intersection point of the cross. So a wish made on a cross was a way of anchoring that wish at the intersection of the cross until the wish was fulfilled. The superstition was well known among early European cultures as well, but it apparently required two people. A well-wisher would place their index finger over the index finger of the person making the wish, and the two fingers formed a cross. One makes the wish, and the other supports it. Over time, the custom was simplified so that a person could wish on their own by crossing their fingers. Fingers crossed evolved to the phrase, keep your fingers crossed, with no actual finger crossing at all. And it's been said that crossing the fingers was associated at one time with people who, when they lied, they tried to protect themselves from God's wrath for breaking one of the 10 Commandments. Then again, it's been suggested that crossing your fingers when lying evolved from crossing your fingers for luck. That is, it's a way to silently ask for luck so that you could get away with a lie. That's an interesting twist. You know, we'd like to think that most people tell the truth most of the time. But there are some people who unquestionably lie more than others. We live in a world where lying has become a fairly common occurrence. So much so, there are scores of businesses that fact-check political statements and business releases in order to identify truths from untruths. The Washington Post, for example, has a fact-checker team, which has adopted its own unique standard to be applied to fact-checking the claims of politicians, political candidates, diplomats, or interest groups. They award certain symbols when judging the truth of statements or assertions, and they call them either Pinocchios or Geppettos. One Pinocchio, for example, reflects some shading of the facts, selective telling of the truth, some omissions and exaggerations, but no outright falsehoods. Mostly true, as it were. Two Pinocchios indicates significant omissions, exaggerations with the possibility of some factual errors like a half-truth. And there are 3 and 4 Pinocchios, an upside-down one, which means a statement has flip-flopped. There's even a bottomless Pinocchio, when a false statement has been repeated at least 20 times, and there's no question the politician is aware that their facts are wrong. On the truth side, there's the Geppetto checkmark for statements and claims that contain the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You know, there are innumerable reasons why people lie. Some people lie because they want to protect themselves from an unpleasant situation or conflict. Case in point, a child who lies to avoid getting into trouble or to avoid the undesired consequences of punishment. And you come to think of it, adults do the same thing. There are those who lie to protect the feelings of others and to spare them pain, while others lie to protect their own self-esteem or self-confidence. When someone says they didn't really want to win a raffle item or they really didn't want to get a job they applied for, they may be lying to protect their own feelings. Even when a child shouts, "I hate you," at their parent, they may be trying to protect themselves from feeling hurt or from being rejected by others, more so than stating an untruth or a truth. Then there are those who lie so that they can be accepted by others, and those who lie to manipulate others. Some people tell lies even when there's no apparent purpose, and when the lies they've told are as clear as day and can easily be disproved. There are those who lie compulsively or repetitively about everything, daily, big or small lies, about important things, about inconsequential things. For them, the lie being told may not even seem like a lie. Studies have shown that for some people, the primary reason they lie when it really doesn't matter to anyone else is because they believe in their minds that it does matter. For example, for some, the reason they lie is that their own memory is unreliable. So they try to compensate for that by saying things they believe will help them when they're put on the spot. They believe their inability to remember reflects poorly on their intelligence, their credibility, or their competence. So rather than saying they don't remember something or someone, they lie, and their lie becomes their actual truth. Others who lie repeatedly may have a need to always be in control of themselves. When something interferes with that sense of control, they create a lie, reflecting a narrative they want. There are those who lie with the best of intentions. Some people call them white lies. You look wonderful. Dinner was fabulous. And think about birthday presents, Christmas gifts, surprise parties. People lie about where they were, if they went shopping, what they may have brought and bought. It may be with the best of intentions, but they're still lies. Maybe they're white lies. For some, those white lies are nothing more than a reason or excuse rather than an untruth. The ethical philosophy behind telling a white lie has for ages been debated the world over by theologians and philosophers. If keeping someone from being unnecessarily hurt means omitting the truth or telling a half-truth, is that white lie justifiable, or is it just an excuse? Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a white lie as a lie about a small or unimportant matter that someone tells to avoid hurting another. And you know what? There are also fibs. Merriam-Webster's defines that as a trivial or child lie. And speaking of telling the truth, we learned as young school children how our founding father, George Washington, was destined to be a man of truthfulness and integrity from a very young age. We learned that honesty was an integral part of who he was, and we learned that in large part, All of this from the famous tale of the Washington family cherry tree. And the story went something like this. When George Washington was about 6 years old, he was given a hatchet and was constantly going about chopping everything that came into his sight. One day, he apparently used that hatchet on a cherry tree in the family garden. The following day, after discovering the cut tree, his father asked him if he knew who did it. And as we know, George said something to the effect of, "Father, I cannot tell a lie. It was I who cut it with my hatchet." Good for him. Good that young George spoke honestly and faced the probable consequences of his action. And as the story goes, Washington's father embraced him and rejoiced that his son's honesty was worth more than 1,000 trees. Ironically, this iconic tale about the value of truth and honesty is itself simply not true. The truth is, the story was invented by one of George Washington's first biographers, a minister and bookseller by the name of Mason Locke Weems. After George Washington's death in 1799, people wanted to learn more about the man. And as Weems explained to a publisher in January 1800, Washington, you know, is gone. Millions are gaping to read something about him. My plan? I give his history, then go on to show that his unparalleled rise and elevation were due to his great virtues. First published in 1800, the biography was titled The Life of Washington. Although it was an immediate bestseller, the story of the cherry tree didn't actually appear until the book's 5th edition was published in 1806. That's a bit curious. Pastor Weems, the author, was a Federalist admirer of strict order and self-discipline. He wanted to portray George Washington as a perfect role model, especially for young Americans. It seems that the general public knew about Washington's accomplishments as a Revolutionary War hero, as an American founding father, as the first president of our country, but they knew very little about his childhood, particularly his relationship with his father, who died when Washington was just 11 years old. And so Weems, the author, believed he knew what the public wanted to read by inventing heroic stories that suggested that George Washington's public greatness was due to his personal virtues. He sought to frame Washington as a role model. Ironically, he told lies in order to create a myth that served to illustrate the importance of telling the truth. Whew. And then there was the 19th century circus king Phineas Taylor, P.T. Barnum, as in the Barnum and Bailey Circus, still known today as the greatest showman on earth. Barnum is reported to have once said that, "At the outset of my career, I saw that everything depended upon getting people to think and talk and become curious and excited over and about the rare spectacle." It seems that as a young businessman struggling as a store owner, a newspaper editor, and a lottery official of all things, Barnum met an elderly enslaved woman by the name of Joyce Heth in Philadelphia in 1835. When Barnum was introduced to her by the woman's owner, she was said by Barnum himself to be, quote, immobile, paralyzed in her lower limbs, permanently bent, blind, toothless, and seemingly helpless. According to Barnum's autobiography, despite her appearance, though, she was friendly and talkative and related many interesting anecdotes of her, quote, dear little George. George, once again, it seems, was George Washington. A bill of sale connecting her with the Washington family was shown to Barnum, and that supposedly convinced him of the authenticity of her story, as well as her improbably advanced age. Heth was offered to Barnum for the sum of $1,000, but with slavery now illegal in the North, Barnum negotiated to instead lease her for 1 year. Soon, Barnum toured taverns, inns, lodges, and concert halls all around New England with her, describing her as, quote, the most astonishing and interesting curiosity in the world. He advertised her as having been born in Madagascar in 1674 and serving the Washington family in rural northern Virginia. Although it's been said that Heth had many of the physical characteristics of extreme old age, if what Barnum advertised about her was true, for example, that she was born in 1674 and was the young George Washington's nurse and nanny, that would have made her 161 years old when he leased her in 1835. The stories she told about her young charge, George Washington, including the cherry tree myth, were right out of the book by Mason Weems. And because she was telling stories like the cherry tree fable that people already were familiar with, Barnum's 160-year-old Joyce Heth was seen as eminently believable and credible. Interestingly, and ever the showman and ever the liar, when ticket sales tapered off for his displays with Joyce Heth, Barnum himself wrote an anonymous letter to a Boston newspaper claiming that she was a fake, calling her a hoax, a humbug, a mechanical contraption, and a curiously constructed automaton made up of whalebone, India rubber, and numberless springs. That letter succeeded in drumming up new business as people with renewed curiosity returned to the exhibit to determine her constitution. Was she human? Barnum's, quote, "What is it?" exhibit became another famed icon of cultural otherness. Truth or fiction? And we've all heard the story about Sir Isaac Newton. A young Isaac was sitting in his garden under an apple tree, pondering the wonders of science and life, when boink, an apple falls flat on his head, and in a stroke of brilliant insight, he suddenly comes up with a theory of gravity. Is it true? Well, it seems that a falling apple did exist, and it caused a young Isaac Newton to think about gravitational pull. Why, he wondered, did the earth pull the apple straight downward, perpendicularly, toward the ground? But did it unexpectedly hit him on the head? And was that the singular event that caused him to think about gravity? Not so much. Hidden away in the archives of London's Royal Society was a manuscript containing the apparent truth about the matter. The fact is that after dinner one evening, Newton was in the garden and observed an apple falling to the ground, which only piqued his curiosity about why it fell downward, which then led him to explore the theory of gravity. So it turns out the apple story is true, sort of. An apple did fall, just not on his head. And here's another tale. True or false? Fact or fiction? On a June afternoon in 1752, the sky began to darken over the city of Philadelphia. As rain began to fall and lightning threatened, most of the city's citizens hurried inside, but not Benjamin Franklin. He decided it was the perfect time to go and fly a kite. Franklin had been waiting for an opportunity like this. He wanted to demonstrate the electrical nature of lightning, and to do so, he needed a thunderstorm. He had his materials at the ready, a kite, string, and a house key, as well as a jar to catch the electricity. His son William assisted him, and although he had originally planned to conduct the experiment atop a Philadelphia church spire, he changed his plans when he realized he could achieve the same goal by using a kite. So Franklin and his son took the opportunity to take a walk into a field to demonstrate the electric fluid within lightning. And the truth is that Benjamin Franklin did not discover electricity during that experiment, or at all, for that matter. Electrical forces had been recognized for more than 1,000 years, and scientists had worked extensively with static electricity. Franklin's experiment did, though, demonstrate the connection between lightning and electricity. So it seems that although Benjamin Franklin may have had a kite and may have had a key, that kite and key was not struck by lightning. And how do we know that? Well, if it had been, he probably would have been electrocuted. Most historians believe his experiments with electricity and lightning took place in the 1750s. He died in 1790. What actually happened, it seems, is something similar to what happens when you're walking on a carpeted floor and you touch a metal knob or a light switch. It's called an ambient electrical charge. And here's an interesting one. Could it possibly be true that the Nobel Prize, as in the Nobel Peace Prize, is actually named after the man who invented dynamite? Well, yes, that one's true. Alfred Nobel was an inventor, entrepreneur, scientist, and businessman who also wrote poetry and drama. His varied interests are reflected in the prize he established, and when he died in 1895, his will left much of his wealth to the establishment of the prize we know of as the Nobel Prize, including the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, there are in fact 5 separate Nobel Prizes that, according to the will of Alfred Nobel, are awarded to, quote, those who during the preceding year have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. Since 1901, the Nobel Prize has honored men and women from around the world for outstanding achievements in physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, literature, and for work in peace. But dynamite, as in nitroglycerin and explosives? Alfred Nobel was born in Stockholm, Sweden in 1833. His father, an engineer and inventor who built bridges and buildings and experimented with different techniques for blasting rocks. And after his schooling, Alfred Nobel met an Italian chemist who had just invented nitroglycerin, a highly explosive liquid. Nobel became interested in nitroglycerin as an explosive, and especially how it could safely be put to use in the field of construction. You know, as a side note, after several explosions, including one in which his own brother was killed, city authorities were convinced that nitroglycerin production of any kind was too dangerous, and they forbade further experimentation by Nobel within the city limits of Stockholm, leaving him no choice but to move his experiments to a large barge anchored on a lake outside the city. But as a result of his experimentation, Nobel patented a new explosive material under the name of dynamite, and he amassed a fortune, and he left the money to award the prize annually, including the one for peace. A strange mix, it seems, dynamite and an award for peace. And finally, speaking of chemicals, not long ago, Elon Musk, reportedly the world's wealthiest man, said, no doubt kiddingly, he'd like to buy Coca-Cola and put the cocaine back in. And you may have heard that Coca-Cola was originally invented as a kind of pharmaceutical elixir. Was the Coke that we've come to know really Coke, as in cocaine? Is there any truth to the myth of Elon Musk's statement? Did Coca-Cola really contain an illicit ingredient when it was first created? Well, the answer is pharmacist John Pemberton invented Coca-Cola in 1885, making the original formula in his backyard. He advertised it as a patent medicine that could cure headaches, upset stomach, and fatigue. A patent medicine was one that the government didn't regulate, and it could contain addictive and even toxic ingredients, mercury, lead. It seems that Pemberton's original formula did contain a form of cocaine, but the form was an extract of the coca leaf, which in turn is what inspired the name Coca-Cola. The coca leaf in its natural form is harmless and a mild stimulant, like coffee. But apparently a form of cocaine called cocaine alkaloid was present at very tiny levels, and it is in most coca leaves. That can be extracted and purified, and at the time, in fact, cocaine was even legal, and it was used in medicines. The bottom line is that even though Coca-Cola may have originally contained a tiny amount of cocaine in the form of that coca leaf extract, the truth, according to the company, is that in the very early 1900s, any type of narcotic was removed, and cocaine was never an added ingredient in Coca-Cola. And finally, when it was first created in 1929, the bubbly citrus soft drink called Bib Label Lithiated Lemon Lime Soda was packed with a mood-enhancing chemical known as lithium. Lithium's effects may have been an early draw for what we now know is 7-Up. The drink contained the compound lithium citrate, and it began selling 2 weeks before the stock market crash in the Great Depression of 1929. Soon, its name was changed to 7-Up, the 7 for the 7 ingredients, and the up for lithium, which is said to give a mental lift. By the way, the US FDA banned the use of lithium in beer and soft drinks in 1948, and 7-Up was reformulated 2 years later. I'm Jay Elias. Thank you for watching this episode of Live and Learn. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to your joining me again for another program designed to enhance and encourage your personal wellness and awareness. Until then, remember, it's never too late to learn, and consider this. The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau once wrote that there are always 4 sides to a story: your side, their side, the truth, and what really happened.